Hello. We are now at the end of Chapter 3, the section on understanding science as part of the book Transgender Ideology and Gender Dysphoria, a Catholic Response. This is a commentary that goes along with the book. So what do we need to understand about science? Well, this section could probably be removed from the book if we were a different church. But I think it's an important one to keep. It's 5 pages long, which you can glance through if you don't need, but if you do, I think it's useful. Why is it in here? Well, because we say a Catholic response. So this is a Catholic response to the transgender issue, gender ideology and gender dysphoria. Well, because from some other Christian traditions, the rule is sola scriptura, right? Scripture alone is all you need. Therefore, all you need is section 3.6. What does the scripture say? But as Catholics, we don't just say, what do the scriptures say, right? Scriptures are part of our tool belt, right? It's one of the tools in the tool belt for approaching the world. But we also have the magisterium, we have we have the lives of the saints, we have the ecumenical councils, right, part of the magisterium. We also have the natural world around us and science as well as reason, right? Reason plays into it as well, right? We have other tools in the tool belt, but I think in this situation of the transgender issue, it's particularly important because what I'm proposing here is that there is a difference between transgender ideology and gender dysphoria. Well, gender dysphoria is a medical condition. So if it's a medical condition, then we're going to have to look at the medical science, right? It's not enough to move into the rhetoric. If we're just dealing with rhetoric, then we can fight transgender ideology, right? This could be a philosophical thing, a theological thing. But if we're dealing with gender dysphoria, we're saying, no, there are actually people who are not just in an ideology. There might be a medical condition as well. Well, then we need the help of medical science, right? And what medical science says is not irrelevant, right? This is not an irrelevant thing. Well, why do people not know this, right? Well, there's this idea that the church is, that Christianity is antithetical to science. Like that, this is a big part of the latter 20th and 21st century. And I know in Providence, Rhode Island, we have these billboards sometimes, actually pretty frequently, from evangelical groups, not from within Rhode Island, international groups who get these billboards, who are anti-Big Bang, anti-evolution, anti-science, and they're on the billboards and they call 1-800-TRUTH or whatever it is. Well, if you were a Catholic or Protestant or non-believer or agnostic and you drive down the road and you see this Christian thing, giant Christian message on the wall that says, well, pick between science and faith because they're contradictory, right? You can't believe in evolution if you're a Christian. You can't believe in the Big Bang if you're a Christian. They're doing more harm than good, right? Because we don't hear preached on Sunday, right, the benefits of science, right? It just never seems to make it into the liturgical cycle. So even practicing Catholics may never hear the idea that they can work together. But what they do, when they do hear it, they hear it from these Pentecostal evangelicals. They're saying they are completely irreconcilable. So, this is not going without, it's not without note. Also within the Catholic tradition, we have notoriously the Galileo Galilei case where Galileo is condemned for his stance about the heliocentric universe and some of his perspectives. But, just a quick defense. Galileo, he was under house arrest in a palace, right? He wasn't tortured. He wasn't thrown in jail. was 1633, right? This isn't recently. Um, his, I think his daughter became a nun, right? He was the divide, even when it was at its worst, was not as much of a divide as people tend to think it was, right? And in more recent times, we had people like Gregor Mendel, who was an Augustinian who discovered genetics. We have Copernicus, who was an Augustinian canon who invented the heliocentric solar system, right? He proposed it more as a hypothesis, right? So as a hypothesis, he wasn't condemned. And the Jesuit George Lemaitre, who came up with the Big Bang Theory, right? So the Big Bang Theory is 20th century Catholicism, right, from a scientific perspective. So like and this is just to name a few of the clergy who were notable scientists. But we have, if you count the Catholic laity and Christian laity, well, look at all of the science and technology that has derived from Christian Europe and the Christianized world, right? Europe was 3,000 years more advanced than the Americas when the colonialists arrived. 3,000 years more advanced in science and technology, right? This isn't. Christianity didn't slow down technology, right? Certainly didn't. You could say, well, look at China was very advanced too. Well, that's fine, but it's not like China was advanced and Europe started to get advanced and Christianity destroyed it. No, it flourished. It flourished in China. It flourished in Europe. Where didn't it flourish? Well, in the Middle East and the Muslim countries, right? They had a golden era in the 1200s, 13th century, and then religious extremists burned their own libraries and shut it down. See, that would be a sign. That would be an example of religion hindering science. Not to say that's where they are today, but there was a hindering of science. Whereas within Christianity, not really, right? Not really a hindering of science. If we look to we have the Pontifical Academy of the Sciences, for example, which goes all the way back to 1603. It returned to its official church name position in 1847 under Pius IX. And then it was given a place in the Vatican Gardens in 1936 with Pius XI. And it has 45 Nobel laureates who are members of the Pontifical Academy of the Sciences. You have even notable people like Hawkins, notable atheists who would attend regular sessions at the Pontifical Academy of the Sciences. It wasn't a straw man academy. These are the best scientists in the world coming to speak at the Pontifical Academy of the Sciences. Right in the middle of the Vatican Gardens. Right. This isn't a fringe group. This is at the center of the church. It's hearing what the science has to say about things. Right. Leo XIII, I think he's really should be given more credit than he has gotten. Pius IX losing the papal states kind of turned inward, condemned modernity, which worthy of condemning, but it became under Pius IX it was more condemning. After him comes Leo XIII, and Leo XIII, not to say he burst open the doors, but he certainly focuses outward a lot more, right? He looks to the rights of workers as a notable thing, important, but he also decides, people are starting to say, well, Christianity is just superstitious, right? It's just superstitious. It's not real. It's not based on anything. It's all mythology, right? We don't even know if Jesus existed, right? We have this Bible, but it could all be just made up, right? We don't know anything. And Leo XIII in some ways, he could have kept it as myth in some ways. He could have kept his strength in myth. But he says, I think it's true. I think it's all true. And truth cannot contradict truth. Therefore, we don't know what's under the sand in Jerusalem. Right? We don't know what's under the sand. We could dig and find nothing. And then, boy, will we be embarrassed. But maybe it's true. He establishes l'École Biblique with the Dominicans, an archaeology school. And they go and they start uncovering ancient Israel, right, buried under sand. You get to the pools of Siloam, where the scriptures say Jesus went down 3 steps, and you uncover the pools of Siloam, and there's 3 steps, right? These are the things that are like, whoa, this is what it said, but here it physically is, right? Look at this, right? So what if they uncovered the pools of Siloam and there were 7 steps, right? Well, not to say it's proof, but it wouldn't look good, right? Or that you can never find the pools of Siloam or something like that. But when you uncover the city and it's as it was described in the scriptures, you go, wow, right? There is a historical Christ, right? We kind of take that for granted. But at the time, you didn't have anything physical other than objects of faith. Now you can actually go and look at it, right? You can look at these things. That was thanks to Leo the 13th. He also created the Vatican Observatory, right? Looking into the cosmos, right? If there's anything to be learned, right? If the skies and the cosmos is the fingerprint of God, right? If we want to know what God's fingerprint looks like, we got to look, right? If there's any truth out there that can be gleaned, it will point to Christ, right? That would be Leo the 13th's perspective. Again, truth cannot contradict truth. Well, what happens if something does contradict something of faith? Well, looking to St. Augustine, Leo the 13th says, Augustine said, if something I believe from Scripture is held out, and then it turns out that something else that is not right, well then it's not the Scripture that's wrong, it's not the faith that's wrong, it's my interpretation of the faith, right? This is true in the history, right? Anyone who thought that, the earth being round, for example, is a violation of Scripture, well, it's not a violation of Scripture. It's a violation of your interpretation of Scripture. Your interpretation was wrong, right? If you thought that the earth was created in 6 days, 6 24-hour periods, well, your interpretation of Scripture is wrong, right? It's not that the Scripture is wrong. It's not that science is wrong. Science isn't wrong. Scripture's not wrong. Your interpretation of either science or Scriptures are wrong, right? So that's the perspective that we take now. Right, we can get it wrong, but it's not itself wrong. And before this, Attorney Patris, Leo says, we need to look at all things, right? All things in the world, right? We need to look at science. We need to look at literature. We need to look at the world, right? In some ways, Leo, his predecessor, Pius IX, turned in. Leo, again, is looking out. He's looking out into the world. But he says we need to engage all these aspects of the world, right? We need to be in the world. We need to engage it. We need to understand it. We need to interpret it. We need to be the interpreters of it. But not using Descartes, not using Immanuel Kant, not using David Hume or Berkeley. We need to look at the world through the lens of Thomas Aquinas. And that's what this document is about. Right, St. Thomas Aquinas, he uses science, the best science of his time. He uses Cicero, right, pagan philosophers of the time. Right? He's using the scriptures. He's using St. Paul. He's using the Gospels. He's using the Old Testament, the New Testament. Right? St. Thomas is taking knowledge from anywhere he can find it. Again, truth cannot contradict truth. If find as much knowledge as you can, 10 sources, right? List, what each of the 10 sources say on a topic, and then synthesize them together to come up with a proper Catholic response, right? This is the Thomistic approach. So this is the Catholic approach that Leo XIII sets out, right? Take the archaeological knowledge, take the knowledge of the cosmos, take all the knowledge, right? All the knowledge in the world. He's confident and will all point to Christ, but not if we use the lenses and the interpretations of atheist and Protestant philosophers, right? We need to be able to look at them through our own lenses, is what's important. That's why this book has a Thomistic interpretation, right? So we're looking at the science but with the lens of Thomism, right? The lens of Thomism is still there, right? We're going to look at law, right? But with the lens of Thomism, look at the human person, but not through the lens of Darwin, but through the lens of Thomas Aquinas, right? Through the eyes of Christ, right? That's what we're looking at. Now, these are various quotes from Benedict XVI and John Paul II, but they point out very important things. The importance of the working relationship between science and theology and philosophy, because every scientific study starts with a hypothesis. I wonder if this, right? It starts with a question. The question is not derived from science. The question is derived from the humanities. It's derived from philosophy and theology. And then once we have the question, the scientific method then goes to prove it or disprove it, right? But that's the point, right? It's the humanities ask the questions. Science looks for the answers, and then it's the job at the end of philosophy to kind of compile it all together and make sense of it, present it. So they work together, right? And they need to work together because science and technology, without a focus on the humanities, makes us cogs in a machine, right? It makes us just, we're going to be overrun by robots, or right? The idea that if science can take place, it should take place, right? This is what could create things like a coronavirus pandemic. Maybe we don't know yet, but it could be because we created it, right? We need the humanities to say, think of the human cost, right? Think of the human person. Think about what will make us ultimately happy. And it's that relationship between the two that matters, right? It's science without ethics is dangerous, but likewise, faith without science is equally not useful, which is kind of what John Paul II wrote to a conference in 1988, where he says, science can purify religion from error. Science can purify religion from error and superstition, while religion purifies science from idolatry and false absolutes. Each discipline should therefore retain its integrity and yet be open to the insights and discovery of the other. Very important point, right? Some people tend to think that science has all of the answers, right? All you need is science. Well, not really, right? That's kind of a false absolute too, that the idea that science knows everything. Well, not really, right? Not really. But at the same time, without science, religion can be, good, thunder is God bowling, right? Right? Science purifies us of those superstitions. It's the need for both. So this book, as we are about to enter into the science in the next section, it's this combination of using science, theology, and philosophy together in a unified way, each one purifying the other, right? Kind of keeping an agnosticism in some sense, because nothing can claim absolute truth. But together they can be synthesized into something that's very good, right? That's the idea. Okay, well, this is a shorter section, so we'll leave it at that.